Rain hammered against my face as I ran through the darkened streets of Lake Forest, my sneakers splashing through puddles that had formed along the cracked sidewalk. Ethan's weight pressed against my chest, his small body shaking with each labored breath. The wheezing sound coming from his lungs sent waves of panic through me that I fought desperately to control. 6 years old, and my son had already spent more nights in emergency rooms than most adults. But tonight was different. Tonight, his inhaler had shattered when he'd collapsed on the sidewalk 3 blocks from our apartment, the precious blue plastic scattering across wet concrete before I could catch it. His lips were turning an alarming shade of blue, darker with each passing second. I'd seen this progression before during his worst attacks, knew exactly how little time we had before things became critical. The nearest pharmacy was closed. My car had died 2 weeks ago and remained unfixed because I couldn't afford the repairs, and calling an ambulance would mean bills I'd never be able to pay on my nurse's salary. So I ran toward the only lights I could see through the downpour. Massive iron gates attached to stone pillars that marked the entrance to a world I'd only ever glimpsed from a distance. The mansions in this part of Lake Forest existed in a different universe than the cramped apartment Ethan and I shared on the south side of Chicago. I'd driven through here once, years ago, marveling at the sprawling estates behind their protective walls. Never imagined I'd be standing at one of those gates, drenched and desperate, my son dying in my arms. My fingers found the intercom button, pressing it repeatedly as rain streamed down my face. Please, I thought. Please let someone be home. Please let them help us. The seconds stretched impossibly long before a voice emerged from the speaker, male and controlled, with an edge of authority that made me straighten instinctively despite my terror. Yes? The single word carried more weight than any question I'd ever heard. Please. I gasped into the intercom, my voice breaking. My son collapsed. He can't breathe. He has asthma and his inhaler broke. Please. He needs help. We need help. The words tumbled out desperately, unprofessionally, every bit of my nursing training abandoned in the face of watching my own child suffocate. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then the gates began to swing open with surprising speed, smooth and silent despite their obvious weight. I staggered forward, my legs burning with exertion as I carried Ethan up the long driveway. The mansion loomed ahead, illuminated by exterior lights that turned the rain into silver curtains. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost offensive given the circumstances. All stone and glass and money that I'd never possess in 3 lifetimes. The front door opened before I reached it, spilling warm light across the wet stone steps. A man stood in the threshold, and even through my panic, I registered his presence like a physical force. Tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders filling out an expensive shirt that had been tailored to emphasize every line of his athletic build. Dark hair was pushed back from a face that might have been handsome if not for the intensity burning in his gray eyes, an assessment happening in the seconds it took me to climb those final steps. Asthma attack, I managed, my nursing instincts kicking in despite everything. 6 years old, no inhaler, respiratory distress for approximately 8 minutes. He needs nebulizer treatment immediately and possibly oxygen support. Something shifted in the man's expression, his eyes dropping to Ethan's bluish lips, and the desperate way his small chest heaved with each insufficient breath. He moved with startling speed for someone his size, closing the distance between us and lifting Ethan from my arms with a gentleness that contradicted his intimidating presence. "Inside," he commanded, already turning toward the door. "Now." I followed him into an entrance hall that dwarfed any room I'd ever stood in, barely registering the marble floors and soaring ceilings as he carried my son through a doorway to the left. A woman appeared instantly, middle-aged and composed in what looked like household staff uniform. "Call Dr. Lawrence," the man ordered, his voice sharp with urgency but never raised. "Medical emergency, pediatric asthma attack. Tell him to bring everything for respiratory distress." The woman disappeared immediately, already reaching for her phone. The man laid Ethan carefully on a leather sofa in what appeared to be a sitting room, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he positioned my son to optimize breathing. I dropped to my knees beside the sofa, my hand finding Ethan's, noting his pulse was rapid and thready beneath my fingers. "Ethan, baby," Breathe for me, I whispered, falling back into the techniques we'd practiced during previous attacks. Nice and slow. In through your nose. But his nose was too congested with panic and fluid, each attempt resulting in that horrible wheezing sound that haunted my nightmares. How long has he had asthma? The man's voice came from directly behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Since he was 2, I answered automatically, years of medical training overriding my awareness of him. Usually well controlled with daily medication and rescue inhaler, but he's been fighting a cold this week. Respiratory infections trigger severe episodes. My mother had asthma. The statement was flat, emotionless, but something in the way he said it made me glance up. His eyes were fixed on Ethan with an intensity that went beyond normal concern for a stranger. She died during an attack when I was 14. The ambulance took too long to reach our neighborhood. Before I could respond, an older man in casual clothing, but carrying a professional medical bag, rushed into the room. He assessed the situation with practiced efficiency, already pulling out a portable nebulizer and medication vials. Albuterol and ipratropium combination, he said, more to himself than us as he prepared the treatment with swift, competent movements. Pulse ox at 87%. We need to get those numbers up immediately. I watched, simultaneously relieved and useless, as Dr. Lawrence fitted the mask over Ethan's face and activated the nebulizer. The fine mist began flowing, medication that would hopefully open his constricted airways before permanent damage occurred. My hand never left Ethan's, my thumb stroking small circles on his wrist as I murmured reassurances I desperately hoped were true. You're a nurse. Again, it wasn't a question from the man standing behind me. A statement of fact delivered with absolute certainty. Emergency department at Mercy Hospital, I confirmed, my eyes never leaving Ethan's face as color slowly, incrementally, began returning to his lips. I graduate from my RN program in 3 months. I knew what was happening. I knew what he needed. But without the medication, my voice broke. The terror I'd been suppressing flooding through now that someone else was handling the immediate crisis. A hand settled on my shoulder, warm and solid and grounding. You got him here. That's what mattered. We sat in tense silence as the nebulizer did its work. Minutes stretching like hours as Ethan's breathing gradually, painfully slowly, began to ease. His oxygen levels crept upward. The blue tinge faded from his lips. His small chest stopped heaving quite so desperately. Dr. Lawrence monitored everything with calm professionalism, adjusting the treatment as needed, but the worst of the crisis was passing. He'll need monitoring overnight, Dr. Lawrence finally said, clicking off the nebulizer as Ethan's breathing settled into something approaching normal, and continuation of the bronchodilator treatment every 4 hours for at least 24 hours. Do you have his regular medications at home? The question brought reality crashing back. Home. Our tiny apartment with its leaking ceiling and broken heater. The medications I stretched as far as possible because even with insurance, the copays were crushing. The emergency room bills I was already behind on from Ethan's last attack 6 weeks ago. Yes, I lied, because what else could I say? We'll be fine. Thank you so much for your help. I'll call a cab and get out of your way. The storm. The man's voice held a note I couldn't quite identify. You walked here in this weather with a sick child. Ran, actually, I corrected, suddenly aware of how I must look. Soaking wet, my cheap scrubs clinging to my body, hair plastered to my head, mascara probably running down my face in black streaks. Standing in a mansion that cost more than I'd earn in several lifetimes. Dripping puddles onto carpet that probably cost more than my monthly rent. You'll stay tonight. Again, not a question. A decision made and delivered with the casual confidence of someone unaccustomed to being refused. Mrs. Vasquez will prepare a room for you and your son. Dr. Lawrence will remain on call in case his condition deteriorates. I can't possibly impose. I started, but he cut me off with a gesture. The storm is getting worse. Your son needs rest and monitoring, and you're clearly exhausted. His gray eyes pinned me with an intensity that made my breath catch. This isn't negotiable, miss. Carter, I supplied, though that wasn't actually my last name. Sullivan. Rachel Sullivan. But something made me hesitate to give this commanding stranger my full name. Rachel Carter. His eyes narrowed slightly. as if he knew I was lying but chose not to call me on it. "Vincent Crane. And you're not imposing. You're accepting necessary medical care for your son." The way he said it left no room for argument. Within minutes, Mrs. Vasquez was leading us up a grand staircase to a guest room that could have housed my entire apartment twice over. Ethan was half asleep, the medication and exhaustion from the attack leaving him drowsy and compliant. I tucked him into a bed with sheets that felt like silk against my work-roughened hands, kissing his forehead and whispering promises that everything would be okay now. But sleep wouldn't come for me. I'd changed into a borrowed robe that Mrs. Vasquez had provided, my wet scrubs hanging in the enormous bathroom to dry. The events of the evening played on repeat in my mind. Ethan's collapse, the desperate run through the rain, the imposing gates, and those gray eyes that seemed to see straight through every defense I'd ever constructed. At 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep and padded downstairs, drawn by a light coming from what appeared to be a kitchen at the end of a long hallway. Vincent Crane stood at a massive marble island, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring out floor-to-ceiling windows at the storm still raging outside. He'd changed into dark jeans and a black long-sleeve shirt, more casual, but no less intimidating. "Can't sleep?" he asked without turning, somehow aware of my presence despite my silent approach. "Too much adrenaline still in my system," I admitted, hovering in the doorway. "I should probably go back upstairs. Or you could have a drink." He poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a second glass, sliding it across the marble toward me. "It helps with the adrenaline." I shouldn't. I knew I shouldn't. This man was a stranger, in a house that screamed wealth I couldn't comprehend, with an authority that spoke of power I didn't want to examine too closely. But something drew me forward, my bare feet silent on cold marble, until I stood across the island from him and wrapped my hands around the glass. The whiskey burned pleasantly down my throat, spreading warmth through my chest. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything tonight. For opening your gate, for calling your doctor, for letting us stay. I don't know what would have happened if—" "Don't." His voice was rough. "Don't think about what might have happened. Your son is safe. That's what matters. Why did you help us?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "You could have just called an ambulance. Let them handle it." Vincent's eyes met mine over the rim of his glass, and something in his expression made my pulse quicken, because I saw a mother willing to run through a storm into the unknown to save her child. That kind of love deserves to be rewarded, not ignored. The words hung between us in the quiet kitchen, weighted with something I didn't want to name. His gaze dropped to my mouth, just for a second, before returning to my eyes. Heat that had nothing to do with the whiskey spread through my body. "I should go back upstairs," I whispered. But I didn't move. "You should," Vincent agreed. But he didn't move either. We stood like that for a long moment, the storm raging outside, the space between us charged with something dangerous and magnetic. Then I set down my glass and stepped back, breaking whatever spell had settled over us. "Good night, Vincent. Good night, Rachel." The way he said my name felt like a promise of something I couldn't define. "Sleep well." I climbed the stairs on trembling legs, my heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the man I was leaving behind in that kitchen. A man who had saved my son's life, and looked at me like I was something precious, instead of just another struggling single mother barely keeping her head above water. I slipped back into the guest room, checking Ethan's breathing one more time before sliding between those impossibly soft sheets. But sleep still evaded me, my mind replaying the intensity in Vincent's gray eyes, the heat of his hand on my shoulder, the dangerous pull I'd felt standing across that kitchen island from him. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would leave this mansion and return to my real life. Tomorrow, this would be nothing but a strange, surreal memory. Tomorrow, I would forget the way his voice had wrapped around my name like a caress. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Morning light filtered through curtains I hadn't bothered closing the night before, illuminating a bedroom that looked even more impossibly luxurious in daylight. For a disoriented moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back, and I sat up abruptly, immediately turning to check on Ethan in the bed beside me. He was still sleeping, his breathing steady and even, color healthy in his cheeks. Relief washed through me so intensely that tears pricked my eyes. We'd survived another attack. He was okay. We were okay. A soft knock at the door made me grab the robe Mrs. Vasquez had lent me, wrapping it tightly around my body as I crossed to answer. My still damp scrubs hung where I'd left them, wrinkled and sad-looking against the opulence surrounding them. Vincent stood in the hallway, looking unfairly put together in charcoal slacks and a crisp white dress shirt, holding a tray with coffee and what appeared to be fresh pastries. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw clean-shaven, every inch the picture of controlled elegance. Meanwhile, I was acutely aware that I probably looked like something the storm had dragged in and forgotten to take back out. "Good morning," he said, his voice lower than I remembered from last night. His gray eyes tracked over me, lingering just a fraction too long on where the robe gaped slightly at my collarbone. "I thought you might want coffee before facing the day. You didn't have to do that." I stepped aside to let him enter, hyper-aware of how the borrowed robe only reached mid-thigh, leaving far too much of my legs exposed. "That's very kind. How's Ethan?" Vincent set the tray on a small table near the window, but his attention remained fixed on me in a way that made my skin feel too warm. Sleeping peacefully. His breathing sounds completely normal. I moved to the bed, tucking the blankets more securely around my son's small form. Whatever Dr. Lawrence gave him worked miracles. Good. Vincent poured coffee into a delicate china cup, adding cream without asking how I took it. Somehow he got it exactly right. "I wanted to talk to you before you left. About an opportunity that might interest you." Something in his tone made wariness prickle along my spine. "What kind of opportunity?" "Sit." He gestured to the chair across from where he'd settled, casual and commanding all at once. "Please." I sat, accepting the coffee and wrapping both hands around the cup for something to anchor myself. The first sip was perfect, rich and smooth in a way that made my usual gas station coffee taste like dirty water in comparison. Vincent studied me over the rim of his own cup, that intense gaze cataloging details I wasn't sure I wanted him to see. "You're a good mother," he finally said. "Dedicated, competent under pressure, willing to do whatever necessary to protect your son. Those are admirable qualities." "Thank you?" It came out as a question because I had no idea where this conversation was headed. "I'm offering you a position," Vincent continued, setting down his cup with deliberate precision. "Private nurse, live-in. Your primary responsibility would be managing household medical needs, ensuring medications are properly stocked, providing immediate care when necessary. The salary would be $10,000 per month, with full health insurance for both you and Ethan, coverage of all his medical expenses including specialists and medications, and private accommodations here on the estate." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what? 10,000 per month," he repeated, as if that was the part I'd struggled with, plus benefits. "You'd have your own space, complete privacy when off duty. Ethan would be welcome to live here as well, naturally. There's a playground on the grounds and I can arrange for a private tutor if needed." The coffee cup trembled in my hands. "You want to hire me? You don't know anything about me. I could be completely unqualified." Rachel Sullivan, age 28, graduated from Chicago State University with honors in pre-nursing, currently completing your RN at Mercy Hospital College of Nursing with a 3.8 GPA. You work night shifts in the emergency department to pay tuition. You gave birth to Ethan 6 years ago, father unknown or unwilling to be involved, and you've been supporting both of you on wages that barely cover rent in a neighborhood I wouldn't house my security staff in. Blood drained from my face. "How do you know all that?" "I make it my business to know about people who enter my home." Vincent's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, especially people I'm considering employing. "You investigated me? Overnight?" My voice rose slightly, and I forced myself to lower it so I wouldn't wake Ethan. "That's invasive and completely inappropriate." "Perhaps." He didn't sound apologetic. "But necessary. I don't make uninformed decisions, particularly about who I allow close to my household." I set down the coffee cup before I dropped it, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and something else I didn't want to examine. "This is insane. You can't just offer someone a job like this after one night. Why not? Vincent leaned forward slightly, his intensity focused entirely on me. You need the money. That's obvious. Your son needs medical care you can barely afford. I need someone capable and trustworthy. This is a mutually beneficial arrangement. There's no such thing as mutually beneficial arrangements with men like you. The words escaped before I could stop them, and Vincent's expression shifted into something harder. Men like me. His voice dropped dangerously low. What exactly do you think you know about what kind of man I am, Rachel? I know you have enough money for a mansion in Lake Forest and a private doctor on call at 2 a.m. I know people don't just get that kind of wealth through normal means. I know there are security cameras at every entrance and that intercom system is military grade. I'm not naive, Vincent. I met his gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated even as my heart hammered against my ribs. I know whatever you do, it's not something you want on tax returns. Silence stretched between us, taut and dangerous. Then Vincent's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. You're more observant than most. That's good. It means you're smart enough to understand the value of discretion. You want to buy my silence along with my nursing skills. I want to employ someone who won't ask questions about things that don't concern them. Someone who understands that certain aspects of my business are private and should remain that way. He stood, moving to the window, his back to me. But I'm not asking you to do anything illegal or immoral. I'm offering you legitimate employment with generous compensation. What I do outside of that is my concern, not yours. I should refuse. Every instinct screamed at me to grab Ethan and run from this mansion and whatever darkness Vincent Crane represented. But the rational part of my brain, the part that stayed awake nights worrying about bills and medical expenses and how I'd afford Ethan's next specialist appointment, whispered different advice. Why me? I asked quietly. You could hire any nurse you wanted. Someone more qualified, more experienced. Vincent turned back to face me, and the expression in his eyes made my breath catch. Because last night, I saw how you looked at your son, not as a burden or an obligation, but as everything that mattered in your world. That kind of devotion is rare. I want someone working for me who understands what it means to truly care about another person's well-being. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For just a moment, the controlled, commanding exterior slipped, revealing something vulnerable beneath. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual intensity. I'll give you 5 days to decide, Vincent said, pulling a business card from his pocket and setting it on the table beside the coffee tray. That's my private number. Call when you've made up your mind. In the meantime, Dr. Lawrence will provide prescriptions for Ethan's medications. No cost to you, regardless of your decision. I can't accept charity, I protested. But Vincent silenced me with a look. It's not charity. It's an incentive to seriously consider my offer. And frankly, your son needs those medications whether you work for me or not. I'm not going to withhold medical care from a child to manipulate his mother. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. Mrs. Vasquez will have breakfast ready whenever you and Ethan come downstairs. Take your time. He left without waiting for a response, the door closing behind him with a soft click. I sat frozen in the chair, staring at the business card like it might bite me. Vincent Crane with a phone number and nothing else. No company name, no job title, just his name and a way to reach him. Ethan stirred in the bed, his eyes blinking open slowly. Mom? Hey, baby. I moved to sit beside him, running my fingers through his sleep-mussed hair. How are you feeling? Okay. He pushed himself up, looking around the unfamiliar room with wide eyes. Where are we? We're in the house of the man who helped you last night when you couldn't breathe. His name is Vincent. Do you remember any of it? Ethan shook his head, and I was grateful. The terror of watching him struggle for air wasn't a memory he needed to carry. Can we go home now? Soon, I promised. Though home felt like a distant, shabby thing compared to the luxury surrounding us. Let's get some breakfast first, okay? We made our way downstairs, following the smell of bacon and fresh bread. The dining room we found ourselves in was smaller than the formal one I'd glimpsed the night before, but still larger than my entire apartment. Vincent sat at one end of the table, reading something on a tablet, but he looked up when we entered. Good morning, Ethan. His voice gentled noticeably when addressing my son. I'm Vincent. You were at my house last night. How are you feeling today? Good. Ethan said shyly, partially hiding behind my leg. Thank you for helping me. Something in Vincent's expression softened, just slightly. You're very welcome. Are you hungry? Mrs. Vasquez makes excellent pancakes. Ethan's eyes lit up at the mention of pancakes, and soon we were seated with plates of food that looked like something from a restaurant. I watched Vincent interact with my son, noting how he spoke directly to Ethan rather than through me, how he seemed genuinely interested in the 6-year-old's halting answers about his favorite subjects in school. He's good with children, I observed after Ethan had been distracted by the novelty of fresh squeezed orange juice. I like honesty, Vincent replied. Children tend to be more honest than adults. Less pretense. Is that why you want me here? Because you think I'm honest? His gray eyes met mine across the table, and heat flared between us like a struck match. I want you here for several reasons, Rachel. Honesty is just one of them. The weight of that statement settled over me, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine. We finished breakfast in a silence that felt charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Mrs. Vasquez appeared with a small bag when we were ready to leave. Dr. Lawrence's prescriptions, she explained, handing it to me. Already filled. And there are some clothes for the young man, since his were wet from yesterday. I wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, but Ethan's clothes truly were still damp and uncomfortable. Thank you, I managed. For everything. Vincent walked us to the front entrance where a car and driver waited. Think about my offer, he said, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder, the touch burning through the fabric of my borrowed coat. You have my number. The drive back to our apartment felt like returning from a dream into harsh reality. Our building's peeling paint and broken mailboxes looked even more depressing after spending a night in Vincent's mansion. I carried Ethan upstairs, acutely aware of the stained carpet and the smell of mildew that permeated the hallway. Our apartment was cold, the heater having given up entirely while we were gone. I tucked Ethan into bed with extra blankets and sat at our tiny kitchen table, staring at Vincent's card. $10,000 a month. Full health insurance. A safe place for Ethan to live and grow without worrying about lead paint or rats in the walls. Everything I'd been desperately working toward, handed to me on a silver platter. By a man who was almost certainly dangerous, who'd investigated me without permission, who looked at me with an intensity that made my body respond in ways it shouldn't. 5 days, he'd said. I had 5 days to decide if I was willing to step into Vincent Crane's world, knowing I might never be able to step back out. I picked up my phone, staring at the numbers on his card. Not to call. Not yet. But knowing that the decision had already been made the moment he'd opened those gates and saved my son's life, I called Vincent on the 3rd day. Not because I'd spent those 72 hours carefully weighing my options, but because I'd already made the decision the moment he'd offered. The rest was just me pretending I had a choice. His voice was smooth and unsurprised when he answered. I was wondering if you'd use all 5 days. I accept, I said simply, standing in my tiny kitchen while Ethan watched cartoons in the living room. Your offer, I accept. Good. The satisfaction in that single word made heat pool low in my stomach. Can you be ready to move by the end of the week? That fast? My hand tightened around the phone. Why wait? You'll give notice at the hospital. I'll have the guest house prepared for you and Ethan. Unless you need more time? I looked around my apartment, at the water stains on the ceiling and the window that wouldn't quite close all the way. No, end of week is fine. I'll send a car on Saturday morning. Pack what matters. Anything else you need, we'll provide. 5 days later, I stood in front of a small house at the edge of Vincent's estate, my meager belongings already carried inside by staff who'd refused to let me help. Calling it a guest house was like calling the ocean a puddle. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a full kitchen, and more square footage than I'd ever inhabited in my life. Ethan raced through the rooms with the unbridled excitement of a 6-year-old discovering a palace. Mom, there's a swing set outside. Can I go play? After we unpack, I promised. But Vincent's voice from the doorway interrupted. Let him play. We can handle unpacking. He leaned against the frame, dressed casually in dark jeans and a gray Henley that emphasized the muscular build beneath. His eyes tracked over me in a way that made me acutely aware of my own worn jeans and oversized sweater. There's security throughout the grounds. He'll be perfectly safe. Ethan looked at me with pleading eyes, and I nodded. He disappeared outside in a flash, his laughter floating back through the open door moments later. Vincent stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and suddenly the spacious room felt much smaller. "Thank you for this," I managed, gesturing vaguely at the house. "It's more than generous. It's practical." He moved closer, close enough that I caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made my mouth go dry. "You'll be working closely with the household. It makes sense for you to be nearby. What exactly will I be doing?" "You never really specified my duties. Managing medical supplies for the estate, being available for emergencies, providing care when needed. Dr. Lawrence will orient you to everything." Vincent's gaze dropped to my mouth for a fraction of a second before returning to my eyes. "For now, settle in. Dinner is at 7 in the main house if you'd like to join us. My brother James will be there. He's anxious to meet you." The mention of a brother surprised me. "You have family here?" "James lives in the East Wing. He handles certain aspects of our business operations." The way Vincent said business operations made it clear I shouldn't ask for elaboration. "He's good with children. Ethan will like him." Over the following days, I established a routine that felt surreal in its domesticity. Mornings were spent familiarizing myself with the medical supplies Vincent kept on hand. Enough to stock a small clinic. Dr. Lawrence proved patient and thorough in his orientation, never questioning why a private estate needed quite so many medications typically used for treating injuries. "Mr. Crane prefers to handle medical matters privately," was all Dr. Lawrence said when I raised an eyebrow at the suture kits and field surgical supplies. "Discretion is appreciated." I didn't ask what kind of injuries required field surgery. I told myself I didn't want to know, but it was the evenings that left me unsettled. Vincent had been largely absent those first days, presumably handling business matters that kept him away from the estate. But gradually, he began appearing more frequently. During Ethan's afternoon nebulizer treatment, Vincent would materialize in our doorway, watching with that intense focus of his. "Just checking in," he'd say, but his eyes never left me as I worked, tracking the movement of my hands with an attention that felt far too intimate for the mundane task of administering medication. He started joining us for dinner, transforming what had been quiet meals with just Ethan and me into something charged with undercurrents I didn't know how to navigate. Vincent was surprisingly good with my son, asking about his day with genuine interest, never talking down to him despite the age difference. "You're patient with him," I observed one evening after Ethan had gone to bed, and I'd returned to the main house to file medication logs. Vincent was in his study, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up to reveal forearms I really shouldn't have been noticing. "Children deserve patience," Vincent replied, looking up from whatever paperwork he'd been reviewing. "They're honest about what they want and need. Adults complicate everything with games and pretense." "Is that what you think I'm doing? Playing games?" Something dangerous flickered in his gray eyes. "Are you, Rachel?" The question hung between us, loaded with meaning. I should have deflected, should have maintained professional distance, but instead, I heard myself say, "I don't know how to play games with someone like you. I wouldn't know the rules." Vincent stood, moving around his desk with predatory grace. He stopped close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "The rules are simple. Don't lie to me. Don't betray my trust. Everything else, we figure out as we go." "And what exactly are we figuring out?" My voice came out breathier than I intended. His hand lifted, and I thought he might touch me, but it stopped mere inches from my face, hovering there like he was restraining himself. "That's the question, isn't it?" Before I could respond, James's voice called from the hallway, breaking the moment. Vincent stepped back smoothly, the professional mask sliding back into place so quickly I almost wondered if I'd imagined the intensity of seconds before. "Rain check on that conversation," he said, his tone once again controlled and businesslike. "James wants to meet you properly." James Crane proved to be younger than Vincent, maybe 30, with the same dark hair but warmer brown eyes. Where Vincent exuded controlled power, James had a more approachable energy, quick to smile and openly curious about me in a way his older brother kept carefully contained. "So you're the one who had Vincent reorganizing his entire schedule," James said, grinning as he shook my hand. "I haven't seen him leave the office before 9 in years, and suddenly he's having family dinners every night. James. Vincent's voice held a warning note. What? I'm just making conversation. James turned back to me, that easy smile never faltering. I met Ethan yesterday when he was playing outside. Smart kid. He told me all about his favorite dinosaurs. Did you know that the Triceratops is actually from a completely different time period than the T-Rex? Despite myself, I laughed. He does love his dinosaur facts. I told him I'd help build a dinosaur excavation site in the sandbox. Hope that's okay with you? The casual kindness in James's offer caught me off guard. That's very thoughtful. Thank you. Over the next week, I watched James interact with Ethan, building that promised excavation site, teaching him to identify different dinosaur types from pictures, treating my son with genuine affection that made something in my chest ache. For the first time since Ethan's father had abandoned us, my son had positive male figures in his life, but it was Vincent's presence that kept me constantly off balance. He'd find excuses to be wherever I was, his appearances seeming casual, but happening far too frequently to be coincidental. When I was organizing medical supplies, he'd materialize with questions about inventory. When I was reading to Ethan before bed, he'd lean against the doorframe, listening to the story with that intense focus he brought to everything. You're good with him, Vincent said one evening after I'd tucked an exhausted Ethan into bed. We stood in the hallway outside Ethan's room, the rest of the house quiet around us. He's thriving here. He's happy, I agreed, keeping my voice low. First time in a long time that he hasn't had to worry about anything. What about you? Vincent stepped closer, and I became hyper-aware of every inch of space between us. Are you happy here, Rachel? The question felt weighted with more than casual curiosity. I'm adjusting. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. I met his eyes, refusing to look away despite how my pulse hammered. This whole situation is strange. Living in luxury I don't deserve. Working for a man whose business I'm not supposed to ask about, feeling... I cut myself off, but it was too late. Feeling what? Vincent's voice had dropped lower, intimate in the quiet hallway. Things I shouldn't, I admitted. You're my employer. This is inappropriate. Probably. He lifted his hand, and this time he didn't stop, his fingers ghosting along my jawline with devastating gentleness. But I stopped caring about appropriate the moment you ran through my gates carrying your son. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since. My breath caught as his thumb traced across my lower lip, the touch feather light, but somehow more intimate than anything I'd experienced before. Vincent, tell me to stop. His other hand came up, framing my face between his palms. Gray eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. Tell me this is just my imagination, and I'll never touch you again. I should have. I should have stepped back, re-established boundaries, reminded us both of all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Instead, I leaned into his touch, my eyes fluttering closed for just a moment. I can't tell you that. Why not? The question was barely a whisper, his face so close now that I could feel his breath against my skin. Because it would be a lie. I opened my eyes, finding his gaze waiting. And you said not to lie to you. Something fierce flashed across Vincent's features, triumph and desire, and something softer all mixed together. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, to stop this before it started. But I didn't move, frozen by want and the magnetic pull between us. His lips were a breath away from mine when Ethan's voice called out, "Mom, I need water." Vincent stepped back immediately, the space between us suddenly cold. We stared at each other for a long moment, both breathing heavier than the almost kiss warranted. I gestured toward Ethan's room. Of course. Vincent's voice was rough. Good night, Rachel. Good night. I slipped into Ethan's room, my hands shaking as I poured water from the pitcher Mrs. Vasquez always left on the nightstand. My son drank deeply, oblivious to the tension he'd interrupted, and settled back into sleep within minutes. But I stood there long after he'd drifted off, one hand pressed against my lips where Vincent's mouth had almost touched mine, wondering what the hell I was doing, and knowing I was already too far gone to stop. The tension between Vincent and me became unbearable over the following weeks. Every interaction felt charged with the weight of that almost kiss. the memory of his hands on my face haunting my dreams and making my days a study in restraint. He seemed to be everywhere I turned, finding excuses that grew increasingly transparent as time passed. When I mentioned needing to review emergency protocols, Vincent insisted on going through scenarios with me personally, despite Dr. Lawrence being perfectly capable. When Ethan asked about the fish in the estate's pond, Vincent appeared to give us a tour, his shoulder brushing mine as we walked, the casual touches feeling anything but accidental. "You're playing with fire," I told him one afternoon when Ethan was at his tutoring session, and we found ourselves alone in the medical supply room. Vincent had come to ask about inventory, but we both knew it was an excuse. "I'm aware." He leaned against the doorframe, blocking my exit, gray eyes tracking my every movement as I organized bandages I'd already organized twice. "Are you going to stop me?" I should. My hands stilled on a box of gauze. "This is a terrible idea for about 100 different reasons. Name one." He pushed off the doorframe, moving closer. "You're my employer. There's a massive power imbalance here. Then I'll fire you." Another step closer. Problem solved. "Vincent." I turned to face him fully, my back pressed against the supply shelves. "This can't happen. Ethan's finally stable and happy. I can't risk ruining that by making stupid decisions based on—" I struggled for the right word. "Based on what?" He stopped mere inches away, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Attraction? Desire? The fact that we both want this so badly we can barely function around each other? "All of the above," I whispered, my resolve crumbling with every second he stood this close. "But wanting something doesn't make it right." Vincent's hand lifted to my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "What if I don't care about right anymore? What if all I care about is you?" Before I could respond, his phone buzzed insistently. Vincent closed his eyes, frustration evident in every line of his body, before pulling back to check the message. Whatever he read made his jaw tighten. "I have to handle something." The professional mask slid back into place, but his eyes remained heated when they met mine. "But Rachel, this conversation isn't over." He left and I sagged against the shelves, my heart racing and my body aching for something I kept telling myself I couldn't have. The smart choice would be to establish distance, to remind us both of appropriate boundaries. But increasingly, I wasn't sure I wanted to be smart anymore. That night, a storm rolled in with a fury that reminded me of the night I'd first knocked on Vincent's gate. Thunder shook the windows of the guest house as I checked on Ethan, making sure his nebulizer treatment had been properly administered before bed. He slept soundly despite the weather, exhausted from a day of playing with James. I tried to sleep but gave up after an hour of tossing in sheets that felt too warm despite the air conditioning. The storm called to something restless inside me, and I found myself padding downstairs in my sleep shorts and tank top, too wired to stay in bed. The power flickered once, twice, then died completely. Emergency lighting kicked in throughout the house, but it was dim and atmospheric, rather than truly illuminating. I fumbled for my phone to use as a flashlight, making my way carefully toward the main house where I knew Vincent kept candles and a generator. The main house was dark, except for a warm glow coming from what I'd learned was the formal living room. I followed the light, finding Vincent crouched in front of the massive stone fireplace, coaxing flames to life with practiced efficiency. He wore only black sleep pants, his chest bare and gleaming in the firelight, every muscle defined by shadow and flame. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked without turning, somehow aware of my presence despite my silent approach. Storm woke me, then the power went out. I stayed in the doorway, knowing if I stepped into that room, something fundamental would shift between us. "I thought maybe you'd have candles or—" "Come here, Rachel." Not a command, but not quite a request either. An invitation that felt weighted with finality. I should have turned around, should have gone back to the safety of the guest house and my lonely bed. Instead, my feet carried me forward until I stood beside the fireplace, the heat from the flames matching the heat in Vincent's gaze as he straightened to his full height. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" His voice was rough, raw in a way I'd never heard. Walking around in those shorts, looking at me with those eyes, being everything I never knew I wanted and can't seem to resist. "Vincent." My voice broke on his name. "I'm done pretending this isn't happening." He closed the distance between us in one fluid movement, his hands coming up to frame my face like they had weeks ago in that hallway. I'm done pretending I don't think about you constantly, that I don't want you more than I've wanted anything in my life. Tell me you feel it too. Tell me I'm not imagining this. You're not imagining it. The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. I feel it. God help me. I feel it every time you're near me. Every time you look at me like I'm something precious instead of just your employee. I can't stop thinking about you either. Something fierce and triumphant flashed in Vincent's eyes. Then stop fighting it. Stop telling yourself all the reasons we shouldn't and just let yourself feel. What if this ruins everything? But even as I asked, my hands were lifting to rest against his bare chest, feeling the rapid thunder of his heart beneath my palms. What if it doesn't? He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine, our breaths mingling in the space between us. What if this is exactly what we both need? I'm scared, I whispered. I haven't done this in so long. Haven't let myself want someone because wanting leads to pain and I can't afford pain. Not when Ethan depends on me. I would never hurt you. Vincent's hands slid from my face to my shoulders, thumbs stroking soothingly against my collarbone. Never hurt him. You have to know that by now. I do know that. Somehow. Impossibly, I do. I tilted my head back to meet his eyes fully. But this changes everything between us. Good. His mouth curved into something between a smile and a promise. I want everything to change. Then he kissed me, and the world narrowed to just the two of us, and the fire crackling beside us. His lips were firm and demanding against mine, claiming me with an intensity that made my knees buckle. His arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against his body, and I could feel every hard plane of muscle, every barely restrained ounce of control threatening to snap. My hands moved from his chest to his shoulders, fingers digging into the solid muscle as I kissed him back with all the pent-up desire I'd been denying for weeks. He tasted like whiskey and something darker, addictive in a way that should have terrified me but only made me want more. Vincent's hands slid down my back to grip my hips, lifting me effortlessly. I wrapped my legs around his waist instinctively as he walked us backward, until my back met the wall beside the fireplace. The cool surface contrasted sharply with the heat of his body pressed against mine, with the fire burning in my blood. You're mine now, he growled against my mouth, the possessive words sending shivers down my spine. Say it. Yours, I gasped as his lips moved to my neck, teeth grazing the sensitive skin below my ear. God, Vincent, I'm yours. He made a sound low in his throat, almost a growl, before claiming my mouth again. This kiss was different. Deeper, his tongue sliding against mine in a dance that promised things I desperately wanted, but had almost forgotten how to crave. My tank top disappeared at some point, though I couldn't have said when. Vincent's hands explored the newly exposed skin with reverence that made me feel worshipped. Every touch deliberate and perfect. He carried me to the thick carpet in front of the fireplace, laying me down with surprising gentleness, given the barely leashed hunger in his eyes. So beautiful, he murmured, his gaze tracking over me in the firelight. I've imagined this so many times, but nothing compares to the reality of you. My shorts joined my shirt somewhere in the shadows, and then Vincent's sleep pants followed, and there was nothing between us but skin and want, and the storm raging outside. He positioned himself above me, supporting his weight on his forearms. Gray eyes locked on mine with an intensity that stole my breath. Last chance to tell me to stop, he said, but I could hear the strain in his voice, see the tension in every line of his body as he held himself in check. Don't stop. I pulled him down to me, kissing him with everything I felt and couldn't yet say. Please don't stop. What followed was both desperate and tender, urgent yet somehow unhurried. Vincent took his time despite the obvious need driving us both, learning every response of my body, every sound I made, every touch that made me arch into him. He was controlled even in passion, attentive to my pleasure in a way that made tears prick my eyes. When we finally joined, the fit was perfect, overwhelming. Everything I'd needed without knowing I needed it. Vincent buried his face in my neck as I clung to him, both of us moving together like we'd been made for exactly this. The firelight painted patterns on our skin as the storm raged outside, thunder providing percussion to our shared rhythm. "Rachel!" He groaned my name like a prayer, and I fell apart beneath him, sensation crashing over me in waves that left me trembling and gasping. Vincent followed moments later, my name on his lips again as he shuddered above me. We lay tangled together afterward, sweat cooling on our skin, the fire still crackling nearby. Vincent rolled to his side, pulling me against his chest, his hand stroking lazy patterns on my back. "No regrets?" he asked quietly, and I heard the vulnerability beneath the question. "No regrets," I confirmed, lifting my head to look at him. Just terror about what happens next. His arms tightened around me. "What happens next is we figure this out together. No more pretending. No more resisting. We're in this now, whatever this becomes." "Okay," I whispered, resting my head back on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Together, we stayed like that until the storm passed, and the first hints of dawn began lightening the sky beyond the windows. Tomorrow we'd have to figure out logistics, have to tell Ethan something, have to navigate this new reality we'd created. But for now, wrapped in Vincent's arms with the dying embers of the fire warming our skin, I let myself simply feel safe and wanted, and exactly where I was meant to be. The next 2 weeks felt like living in a fever dream. Vincent and I couldn't keep our hands off each other, stealing moments whenever Ethan was occupied with his tutor or playing with James. The estate suddenly seemed full of convenient hiding places, private corners where Vincent would pull me close and kiss me breathless, his hands possessive on my waist. "You're insatiable," I murmured one afternoon when he'd cornered me in the library, his mouth doing devastating things to the sensitive skin of my neck. "Only for you," he replied, pulling back just enough to look at me. The intensity in his gray eyes hadn't diminished even slightly since that first night. If anything, it had grown stronger, more consuming. I'm making up for lost time. We tried to maintain discretion around Ethan, but I wasn't naive enough to think the household staff hadn't noticed. Mrs. Vasquez had taken to giving me knowing looks whenever I emerged from Vincent's study with mussed hair, and James had outright laughed when he'd walked into the kitchen to find Vincent pressed against me at the counter, my legs wrapped around his waist. "Get a room," James had said, grinning as he grabbed a water bottle. Preferably one with a lock. But beyond the physical intensity, something deeper was developing between us. The nights when we could be together, after Ethan was asleep, we'd talk for hours. Vincent opened up about his childhood in ways I sensed he rarely did with anyone. The poverty, the constant hunger, watching his mother struggle with her asthma because they couldn't afford proper treatment. "That's why you helped us that night," I said one evening, tracing patterns on his bare chest as we lay tangled in his bed. "It wasn't just kindness. It was personal. My mother died because she was poor and powerless. I swore I'd never be either again." His hand stroked through my hair with infinite gentleness. "When I saw you standing at my gate with Ethan in your arms, desperate and terrified, I saw her, saw myself, couldn't let history repeat." I lifted my head to look at him. "You're a better man than you think you are, only because of you." He pulled me up to kiss me, soft and lingering. "You make me want to be better." I shared my own wounds in turn. The terror of being 19 and pregnant, watching Ethan's father disappear without a backward glance, the years of scraping by, the constant fear that I wasn't enough, that one mistake would cost Ethan everything. Vincent listened with complete focus, his arms tightening around me whenever emotion made my voice waver. "He's an idiot," Vincent said fiercely when I'd finished. "Walking away from you both, from what you could have been." "His loss," I replied, meaning it for the first time in 6 years, because it led me here, to you. But our private bubble couldn't last forever. Reality intruded one evening when Vincent had business associates visiting. I was supposed to stay in the guest house, but Ethan had developed a mild fever, and I'd needed to get supplies from the main house medical room. I heard the voices before I saw them, men speaking in low tones in the entrance hall, Vincent's voice among them, harder than I'd ever heard it, discussing territories and percentages and shipments. The kind of conversation that made it impossible to pretend he was just a successful businessman. "Rachel." Vincent appeared in the doorway of the medical room, and I could see him shift from whoever he'd been with those men back to the Vincent I knew. I thought you were staying with Ethan tonight. He has a fever. I needed children's acetaminophen. I held up the bottle I'd retrieved. I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting. He crossed to me, cupping my face in his hands. Everything okay? Does he need Dr. Lawrence? Just a cold. Nothing serious. I leaned into his touch, needing the reassurance after hearing the coldness in his voice with those other men. I should get back to him. Vincent walked me to the door, and that's when one of his associates appeared in the hallway. A woman, maybe 40, dressed in a designer suit that screamed money and power. Her eyes swept over me in assessment, lingering on Vincent's hand resting possessively on my lower back. Vincent, she purred, completely ignoring my presence. We still need to discuss the Miami arrangement. Perhaps over drinks later? I'm occupied tonight, Sophia. Vincent's tone was polite but dismissive. James can finalize the Miami details with you. Sophia's eyes narrowed, flicking between us. I see. How convenient. The way she said convenient made it sound like an insult. She looked directly at me for the first time. You must be the new nurse. How enterprising of you. Rachel is my guest, Vincent said, his voice dropping to that dangerous level I'd only heard a few times. And will be treated as such. Is that understood? Something in his tone made Sophia take a step back, her calculated smile faltering. Of course, my apologies if I caused offense. She retreated, and I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Vincent's hand tightened on my back. Ignore her. Sophia likes to test boundaries. She won't do it again. But the encounter left me unsettled. Later, after Ethan had taken his medicine and fallen asleep, I found myself unable to relax. The reality of Vincent's world had intruded into the fantasy we'd been living, and I couldn't quite shake the unease it provoked. Vincent found me sitting on the guest house porch, staring out at the illuminated grounds. He sat beside me without a word, simply taking my hand in his. Talk to me, he said quietly. What's going through your head? Sophia. I squeezed his hand. The way she looked at you, like she had some kind of claim. She doesn't. We had a business arrangement years ago that included personal involvement. It ended when I realized she was more interested in my connections than me. Vincent turned to face me fully. There's been no one serious since. Not until you. I'm not worried about her specifically, I admitted. I'm worried about what she represents. Your world is so different from mine. These people with their power plays and territories and whatever else you deal with. I don't know how to navigate that. You don't have to navigate it. That world stays separate from this, from us. He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. You and Ethan, you're what's real. Everything else is just business. Is it that simple? It has to be. His gray eyes held mine in the moonlight. Because the alternative is letting that world poison this, and I won't allow that. You're too important. Something in the way he said it made my heart clench. Vincent, I'm falling in love with you. The words came out raw and honest, without his usual control. Maybe already have fallen. I know it's fast and probably insane, and you might not feel the same, but I need you to know. This isn't casual for me. You're not casual for me. Tears pricked my eyes as I launched myself at him, kissing him with everything I felt and couldn't quite articulate. He caught me easily, his arms wrapping around me as I poured 6 years of loneliness and fear and hope into that kiss. I love you too, I whispered against his mouth. God help me. I love you too. Vincent made a sound somewhere between relief and triumph, pulling me into his lap and holding me like I might disappear if he loosened his grip. We sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other under the stars, the rest of the world forgotten. The next morning, Ethan asked the question I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. We were having breakfast in the guest house kitchen, when he looked up from his cereal with the serious expression he got when working through something complicated. Mom, is Vincent your boyfriend? I set down my coffee cup carefully, meeting my son's curious gaze. Would that be okay with you if he was? Ethan considered this with the gravity of a 6-year-old weighing major life decisions. I like Vincent. He's nice to me, and he makes you smile more. He does make me smile. I agreed, my heart swelling at my son's perception. I like him very much. So he is your boyfriend? Ethan pressed. Before I could answer, Vincent's voice came from the doorway. I'd like to be... If that's all right with you, Ethan. I turned to find Vincent standing there, and from his expression, he'd been there long enough to hear the entire conversation. He crossed to the table, crouching down to Ethan's eye level, in a way that I'd noticed he always did when speaking to my son, treating him as an equal despite the age difference. "Your mom is very special to me," Vincent continued, his voice gentle but sincere. "And so are you. I'd like to be part of your lives, if you'll let me, but only if you're comfortable with that." Ethan studied Vincent with those wise eyes that sometimes seemed too old for his small face. "Will you be here for my birthday? It's in 2 months. I'll be here for every birthday you'll let me attend," Vincent promised, "and all the days in between." That seemed to satisfy Ethan. "Okay then. You can be Mom's boyfriend, but you have to come to my dinosaur presentation next week. I'm doing velociraptors." "I wouldn't miss it." Vincent held out his hand, and Ethan shook it with endearing solemnity, sealing their agreement like businessmen closing a deal. After Ethan ran off to get ready for his tutoring session, Vincent pulled me into his arms, pressing a kiss to my temple. That went better than I expected. "He's a good kid," I said, wrapping my arms around his waist. "And you're good with him. Natural. I want this, Rachel. Not just you, but him too. The whole package." Vincent pulled back to look at me. "I know it's fast, but I've never been more certain of anything. You and Ethan, you're my family now." Tears spilled over before I could stop them, but they were happy tears. "We're your family," I agreed. And saying it out loud made it real in a way that both terrified and thrilled me. That evening, Vincent made it official at dinner with James. His brother had been setting the table when we arrived, and Vincent simply said, "Rachel and I are together. I wanted you to hear it directly." James set down the silverware he'd been holding and grinned. "Finally. I was starting to think you two would just keep eye-fucking across rooms forever." He winked at my scandalized expression. "Welcome to the family officially, Rachel. About time my brother found someone who could put up with him." "James." Vincent's warning tone held no real heat. "What?" "I'm happy for you." James pulled me into a quick hug. "Both of you. And the little man, of course." This house needed more life in it. Over the following days, I marveled at how seamlessly our lives had woven together. Vincent kept a spare toothbrush in my bathroom now, showed up for breakfast with Ethan most mornings before disappearing to handle whatever business kept him away during the day. He'd return for dinner, and we'd become this strange little family, sharing meals and stories and laughter. The nights were ours alone, after Ethan was asleep. Vincent would come to me, or I'd go to him, and we'd lose ourselves in each other with an intensity that never seemed to fade. He was insatiable, but never rushed, always making sure I was satisfied multiple times before seeking his own release. "You're going to kill me," I gasped one night as he brought me to my third orgasm, my body trembling beneath his skilled hands and mouth. "What a way to go," he murmured against my skin before starting all over again. Afterward, tangled in his sheets with moonlight streaming through the windows, Vincent propped himself up on one elbow to look down at me. His expression was soft in a way I'd never seen directed at anyone else. "Move into the main house with me," he said. "You and Ethan, not the guest house anymore. Here, with me. There's plenty of room, and I'm tired of you having to leave every night." "That's a big step," I said, though my heart was already saying yes. "I know, but I'm ready for big steps." "Are you?" I thought about it for maybe 3 seconds before nodding. Yes, let's take big steps together." Vincent's smile was blinding as he kissed me, and I knew with absolute certainty that wherever this was leading, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Moving into the main house felt like crossing a threshold into a new reality. Ethan got a bedroom 3 times the size of our old apartment, complete with custom shelving for his growing dinosaur collection. My clothes hung in Vincent's walk-in closet, my toiletries arranged beside his in the bathroom. These small domestic markers of permanence that made my chest tighten with emotion every time I noticed them. For 3 blissful weeks, life felt almost normal. Vincent made time for family dinners every night, despite whatever business pulled him away during the day. Ethan thrived under the attention, his asthma attacks becoming increasingly rare with proper medication and reduced stress. James visited often, teaching Ethan card tricks, and making me laugh with stories about Vincent's younger years. But perfection never lasts. I noticed the change in Vincent gradually. His jaw stayed tighter, the tension in his shoulders never quite releasing even when we were alone. He spent more time on phone calls conducted in Italian or languages I didn't recognize, his voice hard and clipped. The security presence around the estate doubled. Men I didn't recognize patrolling the grounds at all hours. "What's going on?" I asked one evening after Ethan had gone to bed. Vincent stood at the window of our bedroom, staring out at the darkened grounds, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. "Business complications." His tone discouraged further questions. "Vincent," I crossed to him, placing my hand on his back. "Talk to me. You've been distant for days." He set down the glass and turned to face me. And for the first time since that night by the fireplace, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. There's a situation developing with a rival operation. Someone who thinks they can leverage pressure to force me out of territory in the Chicago port. Is it dangerous? Even as I asked, I knew the answer. It could be. Vincent's hands came up to frame my face, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones, which is why I've increased security. Why I need you and Ethan to stay close to the house for now. No exceptions. For how long? Until I resolve it. The vagueness wasn't reassuring. James and I are working on a diplomatic solution. With luck, we won't need to escalate. And without luck? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Vincent pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapping around me tightly. "Let me worry about that. Your job is to keep yourself and Ethan safe. Can you do that for me?" I nodded against his shirt, breathing in his familiar scent and trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. "Be careful. Whatever you have to do, just come back to us. Always." He tilted my face up to kiss me, deep and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of me. "You and Ethan are my priority. Everything else is just details." But over the following days, those details consumed him. Vincent disappeared for hours at a time, returning looking exhausted and wound so tight I feared he might shatter. When we were together, he barely spoke, just held me like I was an anchor keeping him from drowning. Our physical relationship changed too. The playfulness evaporated, replaced by something almost frantic. Vincent made love to me with an urgency that felt like goodbye, his hands gripping me hard enough to leave marks, his whispered words in Italian that I suspected were prayers or confessions. "Vincent, you're scaring me," I admitted one night as he pressed me against the bedroom wall, his mouth claiming mine with bruising intensity. He pulled back, breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine. "I'm sorry. I'm trying to protect you and Ethan, and I'm terrified I'm going to fail. That something will happen to you because of me, because of what I am. Nothing's going to happen to us. The security here is tighter than Fort Knox." I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. "But I need you to be here with me. Not just physically present while your mind is somewhere else planning worst-case scenarios. I don't know how to turn it off." The admission cost him. I've spent my whole life anticipating threats, staying 3 steps ahead. But with you, with Ethan, the stakes are different. If I miscalculate, if I miss something, you won't. I kissed him softly. "And even if things get complicated, we'll handle it together. That's what this is, remember? Together." Vincent's arms crushed me against him, his face buried in my neck. "I love you so much it terrifies me. I didn't know I could feel like this, like my whole world could collapse if something happened to you. Then let me in. Stop trying to shield me from everything." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I'm not fragile, Vincent. I've survived plenty of hard things. Let me help carry whatever burden you're dealing with." He studied my face for a long moment, and I saw the internal war play out in his expression, the part of him that wanted to protect me at all costs, warring with the part that needed me as a partner, not just something to shelter. "There's a man named Volkov," Vincent finally said, leading me to sit on the edge of our bed. "Russian operation. Works primarily in arms trafficking. We have overlapping territory in the port, and he's decided he wants full control. He's been making moves, cutting me out of deals, spreading rumors that I'm weak. Are you going to fight him for it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the fear coiling in my gut. "James and I have been negotiating a compromise. Split the territory, establish clear boundaries, avoid bloodshed. Vincent's jaw tightened. Volkov finally agreed to a meeting tomorrow. If it goes well, this ends peacefully. If not, he didn't finish, but he didn't need to. I'll be here, I said simply. With Ethan, staying safe like you asked. And I'll be here when you get back. Relief and something softer crossed Vincent's features. He pulled me into his lap, and we sat like that for a while, finding comfort in simple closeness. Later, we made love slowly, tenderly. Each touch a promise and a prayer that tomorrow wouldn't change everything. The next day stretched endlessly. Vincent left early with James, both of them dressed in sharp suits that somehow made them look more dangerous rather than civilized. Vincent kissed me goodbye like a man going to war, his hands gentle on my face despite the hardness in his eyes. I love you, he said. No matter what happens today, remember that. I love you too. Come home to me. He nodded and was gone, leaving me in the too-quiet house with Ethan and security personnel stationed at every entrance. I tried to maintain normalcy, helping Ethan with his lessons, playing dinosaurs in his room, preparing lunch neither of us had much appetite for. Hours passed. My phone remained silent. I checked it obsessively, jumping at every sound, imagining worst-case scenarios that made my chest tight with panic. James returned first, around 4 in the afternoon. One look at his face told me something had gone wrong, though not catastrophically so. Vincent's fine, he said immediately, reading my terror. The meeting was tense but successful. Volkov agreed to the territorial split. It's over. Relief made my knees weak. Where is he? Tying up loose ends. He'll be home within the hour. James squeezed my shoulder. He's okay, Rachel. Wound up and probably going to need a stiff drink, but okay. I busied myself with preparing dinner, needing something to do with my hands. Ethan sensed my anxiety and stayed close, unusually quiet. When the front door finally opened around 6, I practically ran to the entrance hall. Vincent stood there looking exhausted. His tie loosened, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. A small cut marred his knuckles, the only visible sign of whatever had transpired. But his eyes, when they met mine, were clear and warm and alive. I crossed to him without a word, and he caught me in his arms, lifting me off my feet as he buried his face in my hair. It's over, he murmured against my skin. It's done. We're safe. Are you hurt? I pulled back to examine him, my hands running over his chest and arms checking for injuries. Just bruised pride and scraped knuckles. Nothing serious. Vincent caught my worried hands, pressing kisses to my palms. Volkov agreed to everything. The port is divided, boundaries established. He won't be a threat to us anymore. To us? I repeated, catching the phrasing. To our family. Vincent's gray eyes held mine with absolute certainty. That's what you and Ethan are. My family. Everything I do is to protect that. Emotion clogged my throat as I pulled him down for a kiss that tasted like relief and love and promise. When we broke apart, Ethan was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at us with his serious expression. Is everything okay now? My son asked. Everything's perfect, Vincent assured him, holding out his arm. Ethan ran down the stairs and into Vincent's free arm, and we stood there like that, the three of us wrapped in each other. A unit. That night, after Ethan was asleep, and the adrenaline had finally drained from both of us, Vincent and I lay tangled in our bed. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, his breathing finally even and relaxed. I need to ask you something, he said quietly. And I need you to know I'm not asking because of fear or adrenaline, or any reason, except that I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I propped myself up on one elbow, looking down at him. What is it? Vincent reached into the drawer of his nightstand, pulling out a small velvet box. My breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring. Simple, but stunning. A single diamond set in platinum that caught the moonlight streaming through the windows. Marry me, Rachel. Not a question, but not quite a command either. A request wrapped in certainty. Be my wife officially. Let me be Ethan's father legally. Make this family real in every way that matters. Tears spilled over before I could stop them. Yes, I managed through the emotion choking me. Yes, absolutely yes. Vincent slid the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, like everything about us had somehow fallen into place despite all the reasons it shouldn't have worked. He pulled me down to kiss me, gentle and reverent, and I tasted salt from my tears mixing with the kiss. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this, he promised against my lips. You and Ethan, you saved me from a life that was all darkness. Let me give you all the light I have in return. You already have, I whispered back. From the moment you opened that gate in the storm, you've been giving us light. Now we just get to keep it forever. We made love slowly, celebrating our engagement with bodies and hearts completely intertwined. Afterward, lying in the peaceful aftermath, Vincent's hand covered mine where the ring caught the light, a physical reminder of promises made and a future we'd build together. The danger had passed. The threats were neutralized. And somewhere in the middle of running from a storm into the unknown, I'd found not just safety for my son, but a love I'd stopped believing existed. A man who looked at me like I was his entire world and treated my son like his own. A family built not from blood, but from choice and circumstance and the kind of love that changes everything. Tomorrow we'd tell Ethan. We'd plan a wedding. We'd navigate whatever came next. But tonight, wrapped in Vincent's arms with his ring on my finger and happiness blooming in my chest, I let myself simply feel grateful for storms and desperate chances and men who open gates to strangers in the rain. Telling Ethan about the engagement turned out to be the easiest part. We sat him down the morning after Vincent's proposal, both of us nervous in a way that seemed ridiculous, given how well my son had accepted our relationship already. Buddy, we have something important to tell you, I started, but Ethan's eyes had already locked onto the ring on my finger. You're getting married? He asked, his expression unreadable. Vincent crouched down to Ethan's level, as had become his habit. Your mom and I would like to get married, yes, but only if you're comfortable with that. This affects you too, and your opinion matters. Ethan looked between us with those serious eyes. Will you be my dad then? I'd like to be, Vincent said carefully. If you'd like that too. I know I'm not your biological father, but I love you like you're mine. I'll always protect you and your mom, always be here for you. That's a promise. My son considered this with the gravity of a judge weighing evidence. Then he threw his arms around Vincent's neck, nearly knocking him over. I'd like that. I'd like having a dad. Vincent's arms came around Ethan, and when his eyes met mine over my son's shoulder, they were suspiciously bright. I joined the embrace, the three of us wrapped together, and felt something click into place that I hadn't even realized was missing. Wedding planning proved surprisingly simple. Neither Vincent nor I wanted anything elaborate or showy. We decided on a small ceremony in the estate's private chapel, just family and a few close friends. Mrs. Vasquez cried when we told her, immediately offering to coordinate everything. Finally, she said, dabbing at her eyes. This house needs a proper family again, and that boy needs a father who looks at him like he hung the moon. Vincent did look at Ethan that way, I realized. The same way he looked at me, like we were miracles he'd never expected but would guard with his life. Watching them together, Vincent patiently explaining chess strategies or helping with homework, filled me with a contentment I'd never experienced before. But it was the private moments that truly undid me. Vincent insisting on coming dress shopping despite tradition, unable to resist when I'd mentioned the appointment. He'd waited outside the fitting room at the boutique in downtown Chicago. But when I'd stepped out in the dress, his expression had made the saleswoman actually sigh. You're beautiful, he'd said, his voice rough with emotion. Most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You're not supposed to see the dress before the wedding, I'd protested, but I was smiling. I don't care about tradition. He'd crossed to me, careful not to touch the delicate fabric. I care about this moment right here, seeing you in that dress, knowing you're choosing me, choosing this life with me. That night, he'd proven exactly how much that moment had affected him, making love to me with a reverence that left me trembling and breathless, whispering against my skin how lucky he was, how he'd never take me for granted, how he'd spend every day earning the gift of my trust. The legal aspects were more complicated. I'd explained to Vincent that I'd formally adopted Ethan when he was 2 years old, after his biological father signed away all parental rights. Vincent wanted to adopt Ethan as well, but his lawyer explained that step-parent adoption after marriage would be simpler than trying to navigate joint adoption as an engaged couple. "The moment we're married, I'm filing the paperwork," Vincent said firmly as we reviewed documents in his study. "I want it legal. I want him to have my name if he wants it, to know he's mine in every way that counts." "He already knows that," I said softly, running my hand through Vincent's hair as he sat at his desk. "He's been calling you almost Dad when he thinks we're not listening." Vincent's composure cracked, emotion flooding his features. He pulled me into his lap, burying his face against my neck. "I never thought I'd have this. A family. People who choose to stay, not because they're afraid or obligated, but because they want to. We want to," I assured him. "Every single day we choose you. We choose this." James threw Vincent an impromptu bachelor party 1 week before the wedding, though it consisted of the 3 of us and a few of Vincent's most trusted associates having dinner and drinks at the estate. No strippers, no wild night out, just good food and better company. "You're really doing this," James said, raising his glass. "Settling down, getting domesticated. I never thought I'd see the day." "Best decision I ever made," Vincent replied, his eyes finding mine across the table. "Second best was opening that gate the night she showed up." "What was the first?" someone asked. "Asking her to stay." The simple honesty in his voice made my eyes sting with tears. Later, after everyone had left, and we were supposed to be sleeping separately due to the superstition about seeing each other before the wedding, Vincent showed up at my door. "I can't stay away," he admitted, looking almost sheepish. "One more night without you feels like torture." I pulled him inside, and we spent the night wrapped around each other, talking about everything and nothing. Our hopes for the future, names we liked for the children we both wanted eventually, where we might travel for our honeymoon after the initial week-long trip to a private island in the Caribbean. "I'm going to make you so happy," Vincent promised, his hand spanning across my stomach possessively. "You and Ethan and whoever else comes along. This family we're building, it's everything." "It already is everything," I corrected, kissing him slowly. "You already make me happy. The wedding is just making it official." We made love as the sun began rising, slow and tender, bodies moving together with the familiarity of longtime lovers, despite our relationship being measured in months rather than years. Vincent was thorough and attentive, bringing me to completion twice before seeking his own release, his eyes never leaving mine as we moved together. "Tomorrow you'll be my wife," he murmured afterward, both of us still catching our breath. "Tomorrow you'll be my husband," I replied, the words feeling both surreal and absolutely right. Morning came too quickly, and Vincent reluctantly returned to his room to maintain at least some pretense of tradition. Mrs. Vasquez arrived early to help me get ready, bringing breakfast and champagne and enough enthusiasm to power a small city. The hours before the ceremony passed in a blur of hair and makeup and nervous energy. My dress was simple but elegant, fitted through the bodice and flowing into a soft skirt that made me feel like something from a fairy tale. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. "Your father would be proud," Mrs. Vasquez said softly, fixing my veil. "You found a good man, a strong man who will take care of you and your boy." Ethan served as ring bearer, dressed in a miniature suit that made him look impossibly grown up. James walked me down the aisle since I had no family to do the honor, and I was grateful for his steady presence as my nerves threatened to overwhelm me. Then I saw Vincent waiting at the altar, and everything else fell away. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of him, but his eyes held such raw emotion that I nearly stumbled. Love and wonder and absolute certainty radiated from him as I made my way down the aisle, and I knew my expression mirrored his. The ceremony itself passed in a dreamlike haze. I heard myself making promises, heard Vincent's voice steady and clear as he pledged his life to mine. His hands were warm and solid as he slid my wedding band onto my finger, his eyes never leaving mine. "I promise to protect you and Ethan with everything I am," Vincent added to the traditional vows. "To be the man you both deserve, to build a life worthy of your trust, to love you both until my last breath and beyond. My own vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. I promise to be your partner in everything, to trust you even when it's hard, to build this family with you. You saved us that night in the storm, and now I'm saving you right back. I love you, Vincent Crane, today and always. When the priest pronounced us married and Vincent kissed me, it felt like sealing a pact made long before that night at his gates. Like the universe had been steering us toward each other all along, through pain and struggle and desperate chances, until we finally collided and recognized home in each other. The reception was intimate, held in the mansion's ballroom with just our small circle of guests. We ate and drank and danced, Vincent holding me close as we swayed to music, his lips against my ear whispering promises of what he'd do to me later when we were alone. Behave, I murmured, though I was smiling. We have guests. I don't care about the guests. I care about my wife. The word sent shivers down my spine. About getting her alone so I can show her properly how much I love her. Promises, promises, I teased, echoing our text exchange from weeks ago. Vincent's eyes darkened with heat. I always keep my promises, Mrs. Crane. Hearing my new name made everything feel startlingly real. I was Rachel Crane now, wife to a man who terrified and thrilled me in equal measure, stepmother to my own son in the eyes of the law. We were a real family now, bound by more than circumstance or convenience. Later, when we finally escaped to the honeymoon suite Vincent had prepared, he made good on every promise. We celebrated our marriage properly, repeatedly, until we were both exhausted and sated and wrapped in each other. My wife, Vincent murmured against my hair as we finally settled into sleep. My family, mine, yours, I agreed sleepily. Always yours. Outside, dawn was breaking on the first day of our married life, and I'd never been more certain that running through that storm 6 months ago had been the best decision I'd ever made. Our honeymoon began the morning after the wedding. Vincent had arranged for us to spend a week on a private island in the Bahamas. Just the two of us for the first 3 days before Ethan would join us with James. The idea of having Vincent completely to myself, away from business and obligations and the weight of his world, felt almost decadent. The island was paradise. White sand beaches, crystal clear water, and a villa that made even Vincent's mansion seem modest. We spent those first days in a blissful bubble, making love on the beach under the stars, swimming naked in the warm ocean, talking for hours about everything and nothing. I could stay here forever, I said one evening, as we watched the sunset from our private deck, wrapped in Vincent's arms. Just us, no complications. We could, Vincent mused, his chin resting on top of my head. I have enough money that we'd never need to work again. We could raise Ethan here, make more babies, live simple. You'd go crazy within a month, I teased, knowing it was true. Vincent needed purpose, needed to build and protect and control his world. You're not built for simple. Maybe not. But I'm built for you. He turned me in his arms, gray eyes serious in the fading light. Everything else is just details. You and Ethan, you're what matters. The conversation grew less serious when his hands started wandering, and we ended up making love right there on the deck, the sound of waves providing soundtrack to our pleasure. Vincent seemed insatiable on our honeymoon, unable to keep his hands off me for more than an hour, making up for the months of restraint before we'd finally given in to our attraction. You're going to break me, I gasped one morning after he'd woken me with his mouth between my thighs, the third time he'd initiated intimacy since we'd gone to bed the night before. Never, he promised, kissing his way up my body, just thoroughly loving my wife. When Ethan arrived with James on day 4, the dynamic shifted, but didn't diminish. My son was ecstatic about the beach, running into the waves with abandon, while Vincent watched carefully from the shore, ready to intervene at any sign of distress. But Ethan's breathing remained strong, his lungs healthier than they'd been in years thanks to consistent treatment and reduced stress. He's thriving, James observed, watching Vincent help Ethan build an elaborate sandcastle. Both of them are. You're good for my brother, Rachel. He's more human now than I've seen him in a decade. He's good for us too, I replied honestly. I never thought I'd have this. A partner who loves my son like his own, who makes me feel safe and desired all at once. James smiled. He's lucky he opened that gate the night you showed up. Luckiest decision of his life. The week passed too quickly, as perfect things always do. We returned to Chicago, and the estate refreshed, reconnected, more solid as a family than ever. Vincent immediately filed the step-parent adoption paperwork, and 3 months later, we stood in a courtroom as a judge officially made him Ethan's legal father. Ethan James Crane, the judge pronounced, and my son's face lit up with joy. He'd chosen to take Vincent's last name, cementing the bond between them in the most official way possible. Vincent was visibly emotional leaving the courthouse, his hand gripping Ethan's tightly. "You're mine now," he told our son. "Legally, officially, forever mine. I've been yours since you let us stay that first night," Ethan replied with wisdom beyond his 7 years. "This just makes it official." Life settled into a comfortable routine over the following months. Vincent made good on his promise to be present, rearranging his business to spend evenings and weekends focused on family. We had dinner together every night, helped with homework, played board games, took trips to museums and parks. The kind of normal childhood I'd always wanted for Ethan, but never thought I could provide. My relationship with Vincent deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. The intense physical chemistry never faded, but it was balanced now with genuine partnership. He consulted me on decisions, valued my opinion, treated me as an equal despite the power differential between us. And I learned to navigate his world, to understand the subtle dynamics of his business without asking questions I knew he couldn't answer. 6 months after our wedding, I woke one morning feeling distinctly unwell. Nausea roiled through my stomach, and certain smells that had never bothered me before suddenly made me gag. I dismissed it as a stomach bug, until Mrs. Vasquez found me throwing up in the powder room off the kitchen. "How late are you?" she asked knowingly, handing me a cool cloth. My hand went instinctively to my stomach. 3 weeks, maybe 4, but I've been irregular before when stressed. "You're pregnant." She said it with complete certainty. "I've seen that look 100 times. You should take a test." The drugstore pregnancy test confirmed what Mrs. Vasquez already knew. 2 pink lines, clear and unmistakable. I stared at them for a long time, emotions warring inside me. Joy, terror, excitement, anxiety, all mixed together until I couldn't separate one from another. That evening, after Ethan was in bed, I found Vincent in his study reviewing paperwork. He looked up when I entered, his expression immediately shifting to concern. "What's wrong? You've been quiet all evening." I closed the door behind me and crossed to where he sat. Without saying anything, I pulled the pregnancy test from my pocket and set it on his desk. Vincent stared at it for several seconds, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes lifted to mine, searching. "You're pregnant?" "Yes." My voice came out smaller than intended. "I know we talked about wanting more children eventually, but I don't know if we meant this soon. If you're not ready..." I didn't get to finish. Vincent stood abruptly, closing the distance between us and pulling me into his arms with crushing intensity. His hands cradled my face as he kissed me desperately, and when he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Not ready?" His voice was rough. "Rachel, I've been ready since the day you said yes to marrying me. This is everything I wanted. You, Ethan, and now this. A baby we made together. Our family growing." Relief flooded through me so intensely my knees went weak. Vincent caught me, lowering us both to the couch, his hand immediately going to my still flat stomach. "There's a baby in there," he said with wonder. "Part you, part me. Growing right now. Are you sure you're okay with this?" I needed the reassurance. "Your life is complicated. Another child means more vulnerability, more people to protect, more people to love," Vincent corrected. "More reasons to keep building something better. This baby, they're going to have everything. Both parents who love them, a big brother who'll teach them everything, a life without fear or want. That's my promise." We made love that night with new reverence. Vincent impossibly gentle as if I might break, his hands and mouth worshipping my body and the life growing inside it. He whispered promises to my belly, to our child who couldn't hear, but seemed to matter less than the saying of them. 9 months later, our daughter was born, just as spring arrived. Eleanor Grace Crane came into the world with Vincent holding my hand and Ethan waiting anxiously in the hallway. She was perfect, tiny, and healthy with Vincent's gray eyes and my dark hair. "She's beautiful," Vincent whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he held her for the first time. Just like her mother. Ethan was instantly smitten with his baby sister, treating her with a gentleness that made my heart ache. Vincent was completely undone by fatherhood from birth, waking for midnight feedings despite my protests, changing diapers with competent efficiency, spending hours just watching Eleanor sleep. I never thought I could love something this much, he admitted one night as we stood over her crib, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. "Not after the life I've lived, the things I've done. But you gave me this, gave me Ethan and Eleanor, and a reason to be better than I was. You were always capable of this," I said, leaning into his side. "You just needed someone to show you." 6 more months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and first smiles and the chaos of balancing a 7-year-old and an infant. Our house felt alive in a way it never had before, full of laughter and love and the beautiful mess of family. One evening, I found Vincent in Eleanor's nursery, rocking her to sleep while Ethan sat at his feet playing quietly with blocks. The security monitors on the wall showed the grounds, ever-present reminders of the world Vincent navigated outside these walls. But in this moment, he looked completely at peace. I leaned against the doorframe, just watching them. My family, my husband and our children, the life I'd built from desperation and a stormy night and a knock on a stranger's gate. Vincent looked up, catching me watching, and smiled, that genuine, unguarded smile he reserved only for us. "Come here," he said softly, extending one arm. I crossed to them, fitting myself against Vincent's side as Eleanor dozed in his other arm. Ethan abandoned his blocks to wrap himself around Vincent's legs, and we stood there like that, all of us connected, all of us home. "Thank you," Vincent whispered against my hair, "for running through that storm, for knocking on my gate, for choosing to stay even when it was crazy and dangerous, and probably the worst idea you'd ever had." "Best idea," I corrected. "Absolutely the best idea I ever had." Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady against the windows. The kind of rain that nourished rather than destroyed, promising growth and renewal. I thought about that other storm, the one that had brought me here, and marveled at how far we'd come. We'd all been running from something that night. Vincent from loneliness and the emptiness of power without purpose. Ethan from a life where he'd never quite been able to breathe freely. And me from the grinding weight of doing everything alone. We'd found each other in the storm and built something beautiful from it. A family. A home. A love that transformed us all into better versions of ourselves. The rain continued falling as Vincent carried Eleanor to her crib, as Ethan yawned and accepted Vincent's offer to be carried to bed, as I followed them down the hallway of our home. Behind us, the security monitors kept their vigilant watch. Ahead of us stretched years of birthdays and holidays and ordinary moments made extraordinary by love. I'd knocked on a stranger's door in desperation and found salvation, found family, found home. And I'd never stop being grateful for storms.